Well, we've had an election, and now we have talk of tariffs going to affect next year. Donald Trump and his new administration are talking about placing tariffs on goods coming in from China and from Mexico and other countries in order to support American-made goods. What kind of effect could that have on musical instruments and specifically the guitar market? I'm going to cut through all of the BS and explain to you what may or may not happen, so stick around. Hey, you're watching Alamo Music TV. My name is Chris McKee, here with Alamo Music in San Antonio, Texas. You can find us online at alamomusic.com. If you are new to the channel, make sure to subscribe, turn on notifications, and like our videos. If you want to support the channel, you can visit our Spring Store link below for custom swag and check out our podcast, the Fretboard Confessional, wherever you get your podcasts. So let's talk tariffs. Tariffs, if you are unfamiliar with them, and it seems that a lot of people are, they don't understand what tariffs are or exactly how they work, are basically a tax upon things that are imported as they go through customs from one country to another. Tariffs are nothing new. In fact, in the United States, a big portion of the founding of our country dealt with tariff taxes on certain goods coming into our country. We fought an entire Revolutionary War over taxation without proper representation, and a lot of that taxation was in the form of tariffs. In fact, in Boston, they had a big tea party about it, you might have read. So tariffs are basically taxes that are implemented on goods that are imported and exported from country to country, and they exist now. In fact, we have pretty big tariffs on Chinese vehicles trying to be imported from China into the United States. That's why you don't see a bunch of Chinese cars driving around. The use of tariffs increases the price of that vehicle to whoever would be importing it. Now, that's an important thing to understand, and I think an aspect of tariffs that a lot of people have not understood. The person that pays the tariff is the person doing the importing of that product, because the tariff takes place on the incoming side of things. So, for instance, if you're in China and you're importing a good from the United States to China, and that's a good that China has placed a tariff on, when it gets to China, the person that's importing it is going to pay that tax, not the person doing the export. And if you know anything about business, what that usually means is that in order to protect their business and their profit margins, they are going to pass that on to the consumer of that product in the form of a price increase. That's basically how it works. So, from a supply side economic standpoint, if we are getting goods from a company like China or Mexico, which have been the companies that have been most talked about, and that good now has a tariff assigned to it, like the cars that currently have it, when it gets imported, the person doing the importing in the United States have to pay a tax on that. And that tax goes to the federal government, who has applied that tariff tax on that import item. And then in order to make sure that they're making their money, they're just going to jack the price up in order to cover that, because a company has to have a profit margin in order to stay in business. So hopefully you understand now kind of how that works. How does that apply to the guitar market? Well, let's take a look at a guitar that we can use as an example and talk about what may or may not happen. Before I talk about the guitar, let's just backtrack a little bit and make sure we define something. I talked about tariffs that are already in place with China on vehicles. So one thing that you need to know right here at the onset is that tariffs can be applied to specific industries or items. It doesn't necessarily mean a tariff is going to be applied across the board. It could be, but it most likely won't be. We can talk about lobbyists in a little bit, but let's just say it's likely that tariffs will be applied if they're applied into specific segments that our federal government wants to protect from U.S. manufacturing. That doesn't necessarily mean, though, which we're going to talk about, that it's not going to have an effect even on American-made goods. So let's use this guitar as an example. This is a Squire. It's a limited edition kind of Jag Telly thing that they came out with. Pretty cool. This guitar is not made in China. It is made in Indonesia. So will it be affected by a Chinese tariff? As a completed item, not necessarily. It's made in Indonesia. If Indonesia doesn't have a tariff for musical instruments applied to it, then on the surface you would say, okay, then that's probably not affected. But where are the tuning machines made? Where are the bridge components? How about the pickups, the electronics inside? A lot of times, if it's not a US-made electronic component, then that means it's probably a Chinese-made electronic component. So even though the entire guitar is being built in Indonesia, parts that it is being made with are probably coming from China, at least in part. Now, if those are going from China to Indonesia, is there a tariff? Probably not. When it's coming from Indonesia into the United States, would there be a tariff on the finished good? Probably not. Maybe so. But this is where the gray comes into place. A good being made in the United States that on the surface wouldn't be subject to any kind of tariff at all coming in from a foreign country could still be affected depending upon how tariffs are applied. And in some surprising ways, I'll give you an example. Taylor Guitars has a factory in El Cajon, California. Last I checked, that's in the United States. In fact, it's pretty close to San Diego. And about 60 miles away from it in Tecate is their Mexico factory, which Cooper and I got to visit this past September. Amazing factory, cutting edge stuff. They're making fantastic guitars to the same level of excellence that they use in their American factory to build all of their American-made guitars. But you know what else that they're making in their Mexico factory? Their gig bags, their cases, and a lot of parts that are then used to make guitars in the United States. What kind of parts? Well, things like the headstock overlay, things like bracing. If a tariff is applied to those, and I'm not saying one's going to be, I generally think probably if, fair heads prevail in this particular case, that you would see narrow tariffs applied in areas of manufacturing that are the most affected through trade. That's what's likely to happen. But broad generalization, let's say tariffs are applied to everything coming in from Mexico. Taylor Guitars manufacturing something in Mexico for a part in their U.S. guitar, now having a tariff as it crosses the border in order to then manufacture that guitar, may then, at that point, have a tariff. The same thing can happen with electronics. If a company is a US-based company, but they have things made in China, like you might have an iPhone in your pocket and it says, designed in California. Well, I don't care where it was designed. It's made in China. So even though a US company may be the parent of that product, if they're manufacturing it overseas, it's going to get hit with a tariff when it comes in. The goal of that is to encourage manufacturing in the United States of that same product. Now, the reason that that's not done is pretty clear, right? Usually it costs more to manufacture a similar good in the United States because our labor is more expensive because per capita we get paid more as a society than the people that are in these other countries do. That's why, let's just cut through it, right? That's why companies offshore manufacturing to a company or to a country with a lower per capita pay so that they can pay less on the labor to have an item made. So the idea of a tariff is let's take away that benefit and now let's increase that cost either way in order to try to get manufacturing to be done here in the United States. That's the goal. But the end result means that previous cheaper good, maybe the iPhone's not a good example of a cheaper good, but usually a previously cheaper good that was imported from China would now be just as expensive as that company making it here in the United States because, again, they're going to increase the price of that in order to cover that tariff cost and pass it on to you, the consumer. So with guitars, there's a lot of raw materials and other parts that are not made in the United States, even if it's an American-made guitar. Martin, years ago, changed some of the things in the guitars that are made in Nazareth, Pennsylvania to reflect that they're made in the United States from materials sourced from around the world. And that's true of just about anything now. So there's a likelihood that as tariffs are applied, you will see the cost of the goods go up. Where this might most likely happen is in goods that are specifically made in China, goods that have outweighed amount of components that are made in China. I think you'd see it in a lot of electronic items. So keyboards, synthesizers, pedals, that kind of a thing. A good example is Fender's amps. They have US-made amps, and then they have Mexico-made amps, and then they have foreign-made amps. The Mexico-made amps usually have components in them that are made in China, even though they're put together in Mexico. So that's going to get hit potentially twice, depending upon how this all works out. But the other thing to know is that we really don't know how it's going to be applied. Tariffs can be opposed broadly, or not opposed. They can be implemented broadly, and they can be implemented narrowly. And this is where lobbyists come into play. So if you don't know, there's a bunch of really highly paid lobbyists in Washington, D.C. that are paid specifically to represent the industries that may be affected by this. And they are going to go speak to congressmen and to those in the administration to try to protect or carve out special niches for certain industries, or to maybe prevent tariffs from happening at all. It's going to be, at the end of the day, quid pro quo. How are you and I as a musician affected? Well, maybe some of our accessories get more expensive. Maybe some of the electronic items get more expensive. I think if COVID taught manufacturers anything, it was to be flexible in how manufacturing works and to not be reliant on a particular country and to be able to move things around. That's why this is probably made in Indonesia, because manufacturing has improved there, and there's also great manufacturing that happens in Korea. If it got really bad and someone wanted to continue to do some import line on electric guitar, for instance, they could just simply have Cortec make it for them instead of, XYZ company in Beijing or what have you. So that's really the landscape of things. We might just see things getting moved around to other countries rather than being manufactured in the United States still. At the other part of it is maybe things get more vertically integrated and we do see some manufacturing return back to the United States. We already, as guitar players, have an adjustment of pricing based upon where goods are produced. And if that was to completely go away, it would dramatically change the retail landscape for musical instruments as a whole. Not just guitars, but you're talking pianos, band and orchestra instruments, synthesizers, pro audio, everything. Live sound, it would all be affected. So it remains to be seen. I don't think at this point we know enough about the plans to accurately guess what's going to happen. It may possibly cost more at the end of the day. It may be a big nothing burger. But hopefully this video has helped you to better understand what may or may not happen with the talk of tariffs and how it may affect your pocketbook as a musician. If you have any feedback or you have any more comments that you would like to add to this that maybe I've missed, please make sure that you do so in the comments. I would ask that, don't get into any big political fights. Tariffs have been around. They've been utilized by every political party in every country for a very, very long time for various reasons. And at the end of the day, for most politicians, it's simply quid pro quo. So scratch my back, I scratch yours. If you don't, I just add 20% to the stuff that I'm importing from your country. That's maybe how it goes. So anyways, let me know your thoughts below in the comments. And as always, if you have not subscribed to our channel, we usually do guitar reviews, but we also talk about what's happening in the guitar world. If you like that kind of thing, subscribe, turn on notifications, like our videos, keep coming back for more. I'll see you next time.